The old photograph had lived in a simple wooden frame on Kate's dresser for as long as anyone could remember. It was a standard studio portrait, taken perhaps 20 years prior, showing a woman in her early 30s with soft brown hair swept away from her face. Her expression was gentle, a small, polite smile playing on her lips, but it was her eyes that held the viewer. A warm, inviting shade of hazel that seemed to hold a lifetime of quiet kindness. For Kate, now 52, the portrait was a comforting ghost. It was her mother, Margaret, who had passed away a decade ago. Every morning, as Kate applied her moisturizer and brushed her hair, she would glance at the picture and offer a small, silent greeting. It was a ritual of remembrance, a way to keep her mother present in the daily hum of life. But on a Tuesday morning in late October, the ritual shattered. Kate walked into her bedroom, still half asleep, her mind already racing through the day's tasks. A dentist appointment at 10, picking up her son's prescription, and finishing the quarterly report for the local historical society where she volunteered. She picked up her hairbrush, turned toward the dresser, and froze. The brush clattered into the sink. She stared at the portrait. Her breath caught in her throat. The face was still her mother's face. The hair, the gentle slope of the shoulders, the familiar blue blouse, it was all the same. But the eyes were wrong. They were no longer the soft hazel eyes she had known her entire life. They were a cold, piercing gray, and the expression had shifted. The small, polite smile was gone, replaced by a tight, unreadable line. And the eyes, now that unsettling gray, seemed to look directly at her, not with warmth, but with a chilling awareness. Kate stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. She blinked, hard, convinced that her tired eyes were playing tricks on her, that the dim morning light was casting a strange shadow. She turned on the overhead light, the bright glare washing the room. She looked again. The gray eyes remained, staring out from the frame with an unnerving stillness. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A cold dread, unlike anything she had ever felt, seeped into her bones. This was impossible. Photographs didn't change. People didn't change in photographs. She forced herself to walk closer, her legs feeling like they were made of lead. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the glass. It was cold, smooth, and solid. And the eyes in the image didn't move, of course, but their focus felt so intense, so present, that she felt like a specimen under a microscope. She quickly snatched her hand back. For a full minute, she just stood there, her mind a chaotic swirl of denial and primal fear. Finally, she grabbed the frame, her fingers clumsy with panic, and turned it to face the wall. She couldn't look at it anymore. She had to get out of the room. She had to pretend this hadn't happened. The rest of the day was a blur of anxiety. At the dentist, she couldn't concentrate. During the historical society meeting, she lost her train of thought mid-sentence. The gray eyes were burned onto the back of her eyelids. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them. She tried to rationalize it. Could it be a trick of the light? A strange reflection from the window? Had she simply misremembered her mother's eye color all these years? No, that was impossible. She had looked at that picture thousands of times. She knew the exact shade of hazel, the way the light would catch a fleck of gold. This was different. This was a fundamental change. By evening, she had convinced herself it was a temporary hallucination, a stress-induced blip. She had been working too hard, sleeping too little. The mind was a powerful thing. It could play cruel tricks. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she walked back into her bedroom. She steeled herself, walked to the dresser, and slowly turned the frame around. The gray eyes were still there. They hadn't changed back. They stared out, cold and unwavering. A wave of nausea washed over her. This was real. Something was terribly, inexplicably wrong. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, wrapped in a blanket with all the lights on, watching the clock tick slowly toward dawn, her mind a battleground of fear and confusion. The comforting ghost of her mother was gone. In its place was a stranger watching her from a silver frame. By the third day, the gray eyes had become a fixture in Kate's life, a silent, unsettling presence she couldn't escape. She had taken to covering the portrait with a dark scarf every morning, only to find it oddly pulled askew when she returned home, as if the figure in the photograph had shifted beneath the fabric. She told herself it was a draft, or that she hadn't placed it properly, but a deeper part of her knew better. The house itself seemed to have changed. The familiar creaks and groans of the old structure now sounded like whispers and footsteps, and the air in the bedroom felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. She began sleeping on the couch, the portrait's presence a violation of the one place that was supposed to be her sanctuary. Desperate for answers, she broke her self-imposed silence. Her son, Liam, a pragmatic software engineer in his late 20s, came over for their weekly Sunday dinner. Kate tried to act normal, but the strain was evident in the tight lines around her mouth and the way her eyes kept darting toward the hallway. Over dessert, she finally blurted it out, her voice strained. "Liam, does anything seem different to you about Grandma's photo?" Liam, chewing a mouthful of apple pie, looked confused. "Grandma's photo? The one in your room? No, why?" Kate hesitated, feeling foolish. "Come look at it with me." She led him to her bedroom, in her heart thumping. She pulled the scarf off the frame. "Look at her eyes. What color are they?" Liam leaned in, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked at the photo, then at his mother, a puzzled expression on his face. "They're hazel, I guess. Like always. A little light in this picture. Why? Are you thinking of getting it color-corrected or something?" Kate stared at him, then back at the portrait. In the frame, her mother's eyes were undeniably hazel, warm, familiar, normal. The gray was gone. A wave of relief so powerful it made her knees weak, washed over her. "They're hazel?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "You're sure?" Liam gave her a concerned look. "Mom, are you feeling okay? You look pale." "Yeah, they're hazel. Definitely not blue or anything. Are you having trouble with your eyes? Maybe you need new glasses." Kate forced a smile, the relief mingling with a deep, confusing shame. No, you're right. It's just the light in here. It's been playing tricks on me all week. I think I need to get the windows cleaned." She laughed, a shaky, unconvincing sound. "I'm sorry, honey. I've just been so tired." Liam didn't look entirely convinced, but he let it drop. He gave her a hug and told her to get some rest. After he left, Kate stood alone in her bedroom, staring at the portrait. The hazel eyes gazed back with their usual gentle kindness. Had she imagined the whole thing? Had the stress and grief of the past decade finally manifested in a bizarre, weeks-long hallucination? It was the only logical explanation. The gray eyes, the cold stare, the shifted scarf, it had all been a construct of her own tired mind. And that night, for the first time in a week, Kate slept in her own bed. She left the portrait uncovered, a silent testament to her returned sanity. She fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, comforted by the familiar shadows of her room and the silent, benevolent gaze of her mother's photograph. She woke with a start just before dawn. The room was steeped in a deep, pre-dawn gray. She didn't know what had woken her. She lay still, her senses on high alert, and then she felt it. A presence. She wasn't alone. The feeling was so strong, so palpable, that the hairs on her arms stood on end. Her body frozen with fear, she slowly turned her head on the pillow to look at the dresser. In the dim light, the portrait was a silver rectangle, but the face within it was no longer looking serenely ahead. It was turned, and the figure of her mother was now facing slightly to the left, her head tilted as if looking directly at Kate lying in the bed. And the eyes, even in the gloom, she could see they had changed again. They were no longer hazel, and no longer the cold gray. They were now a deep, unsettling black. A strangled gasp escaped Kate's lips. She scrambled out of bed, not daring to take her eyes off the portrait, and fumbled for the light switch. The moment the light flooded the room, the figure in the photo snapped back to its original position, facing forward. The eyes were hazel once more. But Kate was no longer comforted. The image was mocking her. It knew she was watching, and it knew how to hide. The rational explanation was gone. Something was living in that photograph. Something was wearing her mother's face. And the days that followed were a waking nightmare. Kate became a prisoner in her own home, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. What if she came back and the thing in the photograph was standing in the room, or worse, had climbed out of its silver prison? She developed a system. She took the portrait and placed it in the hall closet, face down under a pile of heavy blankets, locking the door. She avoided the bedroom altogether, sleeping in the guest room with the door barricaded with a chair. But the house itself seemed to be turning against her. She would hear soft footsteps in the hallway at night, a slow, measured pace that would stop right outside her door. She would find the bathroom cabinet door open when she was certain she had closed it. Once, and she walked into the kitchen to make tea and found all the drawers slightly pulled out, as if someone had been searching for something. The worst was the whispering. It started faintly, like the rustle of leaves, but at night, lying in the dark, she could almost make out words. It was a woman's voice, low and insistent, speaking a language she didn't understand. It seemed to come from the walls, from the air itself. Her health began to fail. Dark circles ringed her eyes. She stopped eating, surviving on crackers and water. She was a mess of frayed nerves, jumping at every sound. The line between reality and terror was blurring. She knew she couldn't go on like this. She couldn't tell Liam. He would think she had lost her mind. She needed help, but from whom? A priest? A psychic? The very thoughts felt alien to her practical nature. Then, one afternoon, she received an unexpected visitor. Her Aunt Sarah, her mother's younger sister, had driven down from the countryside for a surprise visit. Sarah was the family historian, the keeper of secrets and stories. When Kate opened the door, looking gaunt and haunted, Sarah's cheerful expression melted into one of deep concern. Over a cup of tea that Kate couldn't drink, Sarah listened without interruption as the whole story came pouring out. The gray eyes, the black eyes, Liam seeing nothing, the footsteps, the whispers. When Kate finished, her voice raw and exhausted, she expected her aunt to suggest a doctor or a therapist. Instead, Sarah's face was pale, her eyes wide with a fear that was not for Kate's sanity, but for something far more sinister. She took a shaky sip of her tea and set the cup down with a clatter. "I was afraid of this," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I was so young when it happened. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, or that it was just a child's fancy." She looked at Kate, her gaze filled with a terrible old sorrow. "It wasn't your mother's portrait I was worried about, Katie. It's the portrait she was copied from." Kate stared, uncomprehending. "What are you talking about?" "The portrait in your room," Sarah said slowly. "The one of your mother when she was in her 30s. It wasn't the original. The original was a painting, a portrait of a woman. It hung in our grandmother's house when we were girls. Your mother was always drawn to it, even as a child. She would sit and stare at it for hours. Grandmother hated it. She said it was a bad thing, a cursed thing. She had it taken down and locked in the attic. But one summer, when your mother was about 12, she snuck up there and found it. She spent the whole summer in that attic, just sitting in front of that painting." Sarah's voice dropped even lower. "Grandmother said that after that summer, your mother was never quite the same. She said something had attached itself to her, that the woman in the painting had looked into her and left a piece of itself behind. When your mother had her portrait taken as an adult, grandmother was furious. She said it was a mistake, that you don't give a thing like that a new window into the world. She said it could use the new image as a door. Kate felt the world tilt on its axis. The woman in the painting? She breathed. Who was she? Sarah shook her head, her expression grim. I don't know her name, but grandmother told me stories. She was an ancestor from the old country. A long time ago, she was accused of terrible things. Witchcraft. They said she could leave her body, that her spirit could travel and watch people while they slept. They tried to destroy her, but they couldn't. So they trapped her. They commissioned a master painter, a man who knew of such things, and he painted her portrait. They said the painting became her prison. Her body died, but her spirit was bound to the canvas, forced to watch the world through that single window for centuries. Kate's blood ran cold. She looked toward the hallway, toward the closet where the portrait was hidden. The thing in that photograph wasn't her mother. It was something far older, far more malevolent, that had latched onto her mother's image, her mother's gentle spirit, and as a way to strengthen its own prison bars. And now, for some reason, it was becoming active. It was pushing against the boundaries of its silver and glass cage. How do I stop it? Kate whispered, her voice choked with fear. Aunt Sarah, how do I get it out of my house? Sarah's face was a mask of sorrow and helplessness. I don't know, Katie. Grandmother tried to find a way to destroy it. She consulted with people, priests, wise women. No one could help. In the end, she just locked it away in the attic and prayed it would stay quiet. She said the only thing that ever seemed to calm it was firelight and a particular old song, one she would sing to it in the language of the old country. She said it would listen, but destroy it? No, she couldn't. Maybe it's been feeding off the memory of your mother all these years. Maybe that's why it's so strong now. Kate's mind raced. The whispers, the movement, the changing eyes. It was all a sign of the spirit growing stronger, more desperate. The revelation was a hammer blow, shattering the last of her hope. It wasn't a ghost. It was a prisoner, and it was using her mother's beloved face as its mask. The revelation from Aunt Sarah changed everything. The entity in the portrait wasn't a ghost. It was an ancestral prisoner. The gentle hazel eyes of her mother were just a facade, a door for something ancient and angry. After Sarah left, promising to search through old family documents for any clue, Kate sat alone in her living room as dusk fell. The house was silent, but it was a heavy, expectant silence. She knew she had to act. Hiding the portrait in the closet was useless. The thing could still reach out. It could still whisper and walk. She remembered what Sarah had said about the only things that seemed to calm it, firelight and an old song. With a shuddering breath, Kate decided she had to confront it. She couldn't run from her own home forever. She went to the hall closet, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She unlocked the door and pulled away the blankets. The frame was cold to the touch, colder than it should have been. She carried it, facing away from her, into the living room.